Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of The Extra Point here on KLAA. And once again, I'm joined with my fellow colleagues, Justice Gordon out of New York and Jeremy Coleman from Indiana. Gentlemen, football is back as we already stated, but boy, there was a lot of great college football this past weekend. So let's jump right into it. What jumped out to you, Jeremy, with a lot of these college games?
Well, I'm going to go right to a primetime matchup. Clemson and Georgia was not an exciting game to watch if you were wanted to see a shootout, but it was a great game if you wanted to see some defense. Boy, Georgia and Clemson's defense, man, they are just special defenses. They've got really good athletes, really good football players, and they fly to the ball. Georgia was giving Clemson's offensive line tons of issues. DJ had almost no time to throw the ball. And big reason why Georgia got that was that pick six in the third quarter that kind of swung momentum in Georgia's favor. That was a really fun game to watch.
So what do you think here? Recently Georgia just bumped up. They're sitting in the number 3 spot right now. But every year, we always expect Alabama, Clemson to be right there. But all of a sudden now you're seeing Georgia, especially that defense, really be feisty on the field. So do you think Georgia could potentially be a headache for Alabama if they continue the same play in the performance that they put up this past weekend?
Well, I definitely think the Georgia defense will give Alabama some issues. Unfortunately, I just don't think anyone's close to Alabama when it comes to just being on the football plane this year. Bryce Young threw for over 400 yards. 4 touchdowns. They made that game look easy. Alabama, they just reload every year. As to where Georgia's offense is going to need to pick up the slack. Daniels is going to have to find a way to connect with his receivers, and that was something that they did not do consistently in their game against Clemson. So while I think that will be a game, I do think Georgia's got some work to do if they want to make that competitive for 4 quarters.
Well, they definitely set the stage already, and already moving up in the ranks. They definitely will have eyes on them. What about you, Justice? What game out there really caught your attention?
Yeah, I'm going to start with UCLA versus LSU. I think that was a great game to watch on TV. 2 offenses that looked potent right out of the gate. UCLA coming out on top, 38-27. I thought Dorian Thompson-Robinson looked pretty good. Went 9 for 15, 260 yards and 3 touchdowns. The running back, Zach Charbonnet, 11 rushes for 117 yards and a touchdown. I thought he looked great with his vision and finding the holes. I thought UCLA looked very good, very in sync. Chip Kelly seems to, kind of be turning that organization around. They're starting off 2-0. UCLA came out with a W, but I will say that LSU receiver, Keyshawn Boutte, 9 receptions, 148 yards, 3 touchdowns. That kid looks special. He looks like, it's hard to follow up Jamar Chase, but he looks like he could be the next big wide receiver at LSU, and they got a pretty bright future.
Do they have enough firepower? I think that's the question out there. I think, with LSU, every year, you are expecting them to have definitely some wide receiver, deep threat firepower. You're definitely expecting them to have, a running back who can definitely come off the edge and push the ball down the field. Do they have enough firepower to compete?
I don't think so. I don't think so at all. I think they lost a lot of talent over these past few years. I think the quarterback position isn't what it was with Joe Burrow. I think Joe Burrow had a special season that year, and it's going to be really hard to find the guy to come in and do that same kind of thing. That was a historic offense with Burrow, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Chase. They had a lot of pieces, and it's going to take a while for them to get back.
Jeremy, any other games out there that caught your attention?
Yeah, I'm going to have to go to another primetime game. That Notre Dame-Florida State game was a really fun one to watch.
Now, that was an exciting game for sure.
Florida State was, very stretchy at the beginning, hit a few big plays, but they weren't very consistent as to where that was kind of the name of the game. Jack Cohn came in for Notre Dame. He looked much better in a Golden Dome than he ever did in Wisconsin, if you ask my opinion. He showed command over that offense. He was getting the ball to his All-American tight end and Scott Mayer, who's going to be a future number one pick in the NFL draft. I have no doubt about that. But what was really cool about this, is Florida State, they kind of rallied behind a guy we kind of all forgot, and Mackenzie Milton, the former Central Florida quarterback, 3 surgeries later, and after a doctor told him there is no way he is ever going to play football again, sure enough, he went out there. As soon as Travis had to come out of the game because his helmet came off, they never took him out. He let Florida State down. They got a touchdown on the play, and he's the guy that forced overtime. So a lot of very cool, interesting storylines in this game. Unfortunately, Notre Dame found a way to pull off the victory. Florida State ended up missing a field goal in overtime. But that was one heck of a game. I really liked what I saw out of Florida State, too, though. It looked like they kind of had that old swagger back, that they had in the early 2000s, They're very athletic, and you could tell that they were very well coached. Their defense was giving Notre Dame's offense, touted offensive line some issues. So it was a very good game overall. Great game to watch.
Yeah, that game was extremely exciting. And, here on the Extra Point, definitely want to give a major shout out to Milton's comeback and the way that team rallied around him, the way he was courageous to stay in the pocket. Oftentimes when you come off a significant injury like that, you kind of get in there and get a little hesitant, especially when the blitz is coming at you dead in your face, not necessarily knowing, how your leg is going to react to that. And he did exceptionally well, was very poised. So kudos to him. Also want to give a huge shout out to that entire organization, the entire town of Tallahassee, because what they did and the big tributes that they gave to Bobby there was absolutely phenomenal. I tell you what, for me, one of the games that really caught my attention was that Oklahoma and Tulane game. And mainly because the way Oklahoma came out, you thought for sure this game was going to be, another blast in the teeth, right? So right in the first half, Oklahoma scored 37 points in the first half. And it looked like they were going to run away with this. And then that quarterback of theirs, Spencer Rattler, he started making some odd decisions. His decisions were very scattered. They started to kind of go off the rails a little bit. So I don't know if he got into a bad comfort area or just started making some bad decisions. But that's something that they really need to correct. And more importantly, I think they need to start looking at their defense a little bit harder. The way Tulane came back in the fourth quarter by scoring 13 unanswered points and literally made it a game all the way up to the very end, I think that should give Oklahoma a moment of pause to say, how did we allow Tulane to get back into this game after coming out on fire, 37 points in the first half? I think that's something that they really need to seriously look at. So that game really jumped out at me. The other game that jumped out at me, and I'm going to be a little bit biased here on the Extra Point because I'm a fellow alumni here, and that is the Colorado State Rams playing the South Dakota State Jackrabbits. South Dakota came in with a chip on their shoulder, and that chip stems all the way back to May. And I'm not talking about May of last year. I'm talking about May. This past spring, because of COVID, the Missouri Valley Conference moved their game and their season to spring. What ended up happening? South Dakota State made a big run, and they made it to the championship game to play against Sam Houston. And if it wouldn't have been for a freak injury with their quarterback, they probably would have pulled that game off. They came in with a point to prove. Now, I bring this game up because when you look at South Dakota State being out of the SCS, and then you got Colorado State being from the FBS. So the FBS, for a lot of you out there, is the football bowl subdivision, and the FCS is a football championship subdivision. South Dakota State is a part of that FCS division there. The one thing that's unique about them is when it comes to a playoff structure, there's 24 teams in their structure. In the FBS, there's only 4 in the playoff structure. So if you think about getting into a groove, knowing your team, knowing your players, you can actually go back and say maybe South Dakota State came in with a leg up on this one. You look back at Colorado State with COVID, the number of games they actually played last year versus South Dakota State coming off a championship game just a few months ago. And then you look at that two-headed beast they had in the backfield. Number 20 with Pierre Strong. I mean, he had 13 rushes on 138 for 2 touchdowns. And then you had number 22, Isaac Davis. He had 15 rushes for 84 yards with 1 touchdown. They had a two-headed monster that Colorado State defense could not handle. But I do believe COVID, coming off a championship game, kind of maintaining their stride. And then you got Colorado State really didn't play any true competitive ball since last year. It showed, and it showed big, and that's why South Dakota State put a beating on them, 42-23. And ladies and gentlemen, trust me, the 23 points that Colorado State put up, that definitely is not a legitimate picture. South Dakota State beat up Colorado State. And yes, I am alumni, and it pains me to say it, but they literally got beat up on the field. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to The Extra Point here on KLAA. So we're going to jump in from the NCAA to the NFL. Look, this is it. Week 1 is here, Justice and Jeremy, and there's a lot of great football to be played. There's a lot of teams out there with a lot to prove. Even though it's week 1, Jeremy, what's a game that you're looking forward to seeing?
Well, I'd have to say one of the big ones is a repeat of last year's AFC Championship game. Cleveland is going to Kansas City. Those are 2 teams that are favored to win the Super Bowl. You wouldn't have thought that. You would have said that about the Browns 2 years ago. But they had a very good year last year, carried the momentum. Baker Mayfield started to develop in that offense. Kevin Stefanski is turning that program, that team around. That franchise has some positive momentum. And they are expected to build on that. There are expectations that they are going to challenge in Cleveland. One notable note would be that, they're going to have a healthy Odell Beckham Jr. for this game. Cleveland lost OBJ halfway through the season last year. And I think the other big storyline is how Kansas City's new, highly paid offensive line holds up against Myles Garrett, Jadeveon Clowney.
Very much so.
Aggressive style of defense, and they've got some horses there that are going to get after Mahomes. I think that's the first big matchup of this week 1, kind of honestly a future playoff battle, we're probably going to see. And then another one I'd have to say would be the Buffalo Bills. Pittsburgh has to go into Buffalo. Josh Allen coming off of what was almost an MVP season. He really elevated his game last year, took that franchise to heights that they haven't seen since the Jim Kelly days. That's 2 decades ago. So, there's a lot of optimism in Buffalo. And then, I think the other headline there is this truly going to be Big Ben's last year? Reports around camp say that he's looking good, but I think the big story coming out of Pittsburgh is they have to replace some pieces in their secondary. They've got 2 new starters in the secondary. And then they only returned 1 starter from last year's offensive line. So I think that's the big story there. Can Pittsburgh protect Big Ben enough to where they can score some points this year? And can Josh Allen take the Bills to that next step of challenging for that Super Bowl and a Lombardi?
Boy, you definitely said a lot there, Jeremy. You unpacked a lot with 2 great games. So let me ask you a question, however. To your very point, Kansas went out there and they knew after the performance in the Super Bowl that Mahomes got beat up. And he got beat up because of that offensive line. So they went out and corrected that issue. With that being said, if they do not perform up to expectations, what's next? What do you do? Do you work and let Patrick Mahomes continue to finesse his game outside the pocket, or do you try to, put him more in the pocket and get the ball down the field? What do you do with Patrick Mahomes behind this brand new offensive line?
Well, I just think you got to let Patrick Mahomes be Patrick Mahomes. He's a special player when he gets out on the moves. His, off-rhythm, crazy, no-look passes. That's what makes him such a special player. You want to make sure he can go out there and still play his style of football. That's, what made him an MVP, Super Bowl champion, all of that. So, I think you just stay on track as usual. You just invested in this offensive line. He still has his top weapons in Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill there. Edwards-Hilaire's a young back. They think he's going to take another step forward this year. If anything, I would say the defense needs to rise to the occasion and kind of match what the offense can output.
Yeah, and that other game you mentioned, and I'm going to take it there, fellas. Last season, for those of you who are new to the Extra Point, we had a very healthy debate about whether or not the Pittsburgh Steelers are a complete team. Now, look, this is only week 1, so we can't argue that just yet. But I'm going to set the tone right now. You've already mentioned this potentially may be Big Ben's last year. Defensively, did they add any new pieces that may change their play on the field? Some would argue they haven't. So, with that being said, are they going into this season after last season as a almost complete team? And I'm already looking at Justice shaking his head. Justice, go ahead. Is the Pittsburgh Steelers anywhere close to being a complete team?
I think they're actually worse off than they were last year.
Jesus age, he said worse off than last year. So I want to hear what's worse off than last year.
I think Jeremy made a great point. Only one returning starter from the offensive line. When you have an aging quarterback like that who can't really move like he used to, replacing that line and shuffling the linemen, it's not going to do anything but, hinder his play, I think. And, with the whole T.J. Watt drama, him holding out, him not being in camp, him not practicing, he's determined to get his contract, and reports are he's willing to sit out. So if you don't have T.J. Watt on that defense helping out those corners, they're going to struggle against Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen and all those high flyers in Buffalo. So offensively, they have the weapons with Claypool and all those playmakers, but it's going to come down to the offensive line and can they protect Big Ben? And the big piece is going to be T.J. Watt. Can they sign him? Can they get him happy enough to play the season? And it's going to come down to those two things that are going to determine how far they go this year.
Well, I tell you, the word around the camp is that T.J. Watt will be available for week 1, but we'll see. There's a whole lot to be said there. Jeremy, do you concur with Justice's assessment of where the Steelers are at?
Well, I totally agree with Justice. The Steelers were in a much better position last year. If they wanted to, give Ben a chance at one last Lombardi. Like I said, they're replacing a few starters in their secondary. Steve Nelson is now in Philadelphia. There was, some ruffling of feathers this offseason, so they ended up cutting him. But the big difference this year is the offensive line. There's going to be 4 new stars out there. We're going to have a rookie at center, the 3rd-round pick out of Illinois, Kendrick Green. Kevin Dotson will be back at left guard. Steelers cut David DeCastro because he was going to need another surgery on an ankle, his 3rd surgery on that ankle in multiple years. Ended up going out and signing former Pro Bowler Trey Turner. Chuks Okorafor will probably be our right tackle because they ended up keeping Zach Banner on the IR because they did not think he was ready yet to start this year. Going left to right, Chuks Okorafor and Kevin Dotson for about 5 or 6 games are the only returning starters on that offensive line. The one piece I do like that some pieces they added on defense was they added Joe Schobert. They traded him from the Jacksonville Jaguars. That's going to help shore up that inside linebacker depth after Vince Williams retired this offseason. And then they also just went out and traded for Akello Witherspoon from Seattle earlier in the week to help shore up some of the newer secondary depth, give them some more pieces there.
I hear you there. Justice, what are some games out there that you have on your mind that might show you or give you a glimpse into a team going into week 1 here?
Yeah, I'm going to pick up where I left off last episode, and that's with Daniel Jones and the Giants going up against the Broncos. I think that this is a make-or-break season for Daniel Jones. I said it last week. Now I'll continue to say it. He has all the weapons. He has no excuses. Saquon Barkley should be on the pitch count, so they're not going to have him all game. But they have the weapons to do it. They have the defense to do it. But I think this Broncos team is going to be a tough out all year. I love their defense. I love the game manager and Teddy Bridgewater and that offense. I think they can make some noise and sneak into the playoffs this year. And the second game I got my eye on is obviously the Bears versus the Rams. That's going to be a fun matchup with Andy Dalton starting. They've been screaming for Justin Fields down in Chicago. I think it's going to be interesting to see Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey. How does he perform? How does Andy Dalton perform against those two superstars? If he lays a goose egg out there come Sunday, I think they're going to be calling for his head. It's inevitable. It's the NFL we live in now. They want to see the young kid, and if he goes out there and doesn't play up to par, I think we could see an early switch come week 2.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. We talk about, players on the hot seat. I won't really call this a hot seat for Andy Dalton. What I would call this is a make or break moment for him. If he goes out there and, to your point, if he lays an egg, if he doesn't perform, going even into the second quarter, if he's not performing up to standards, I think you will hear boos in the stadium, just like in the preseason, to basically call on Fields to be the guy. So, Andy, we wish you luck, but I got a feeling you might have to throw up about 4 or 5 touchdowns in the first half if you want to see the second half of play. I tell you, for me, I'm very much looking forward to this Jets and Panthers game. I think this is kind of one of those out with the old, in with the new type games, right? So in with the new with Zach Wilson there with the Jets. You got Sam Darnold who's down there with the Panthers. What's going to happen there? People like Justice, ladies and gentlemen, blame coaches like Adam Gase for the way the Jets have played over the years. Or over the past season. And you should see the look on Justice's face at this moment right now. But, I went back and I looked at Sam Darnold's numbers. And once again, we can put this on the head coach, the offensive coordinator. But in 2020, Sam Darnold numbers are as follows. Yards, 2,200 yards. He was 28 in the league. He only had 9 touchdowns, 32nd in the league. He had 11 interceptions. He was tied for 24th in the league. And his quarterback rating, I didn't even think they even had such a type of rating, 32.9. He was awful. He was god-awful. Could this be a new start for him? Could there be some excitement there? And more importantly, new head coach in the Jets, you got Zach Wilson, who's out there. A lot of expectations from those two. That's going to be a great game to watch. And the other game, once again, I'm staying with this quarterback battle here. The Dolphins and the Patriots. When you talk about the Patriots, they're already highlighted in the news, releasing Cam, and then, of course, making Mac Jones the starter. And then, of course, Mac going up against another Alabama quarterback in Tua. Is Tua really the future for the Dolphins? There is some argument that he is not aggressive enough as a quarterback to go in right now to lead the Dolphins into the future. But yet, Mac Jones has already been put on the pedestal. I think this is going to be a great game to see which one of these quarterbacks are really going to step out and look the best out of week 1. So I'm going to go off to Justice here. The Jets game. What do you think is going to happen there with Sam Darnold playing against his former team?
Look, I'll admit it. I said it last year and I'll say it again. Adam Gase was terrible. That coaching staff was terrible. They are the most to blame for Sam Darnold's struggles. But I've said it last year and I'll say it again. Sam Darnold had opportunities to play well, and he failed in those opportunities with interceptions and not protecting the ball, and that's on him.
And that's what the stats prove. That's what the stats prove.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think he has any excuses now. He has DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson. He has Terrence Marshall, a rookie. He has some pieces. He has Christian McCaffrey, the best catching running back you're ever going to find in the NFL. He has a good defense, a young head coach who's hungry. he has the most pressure going into this game. He has to prove that he was worth those draft picks, that he was worth the Panthers investing in him. And for Zach Wilson, this is his first NFL game. You can't really compare a fourth-year starter to a rookie. Like there's gonna be growing pains with the rookie. We all know it. This is a young team, the youngest in the league. So while Zach Wilson needs to perform well, this isn't a do or die for him. He's gonna have struggles this year. This is a young team, so it's gonna be fun to watch. But the pressure's on Sam Darnold going into Week 1.
Well, I tell you what, here on the Extra Point, we've definitely highlighted some awesome games in Week 1. I'm definitely looking forward to it. I know my colleagues are looking forward to getting these games going in Week 1. And I'm quite sure you, the fans out there, you are ready to rock and roll with Week 1. So once again, thanks for joining us here on the Extra Point. And on behalf of my fellow colleagues, Jeremy out of Indiana and Justice from New York, we will see you back here again next week on the Extra Point.